Salvador Dali and Pablo Picasso, two names that define art, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of greatness. One chased fame with flamboyant audacity, the other built empires of influence with calculated brilliance. Today, you will see exactly how ambition, vision, and obsession with recognition turned ordinary artists into immortal legends. This is not a story of talent alone. It's a blueprint of how relentless drive, daring risks, and unshakable self-belief create a legacy that no one can ignore. If you want to understand fame, fortune, and the art of leaving your mark, you need to see the world through the eyes of Dali and Picasso, and copy what they did, step by step. Chapter 1. Obsession Wins. How Dali Craved the Spotlight. Salvador Dali was not just an artist. He was a spectacle. And that spectacle was no accident. It was a weapon. Obsession wins. Obsession wins. If you are not obsessed, you will be forgotten. Far too often, people look at Dali's mustache or his flamboyant behavior and think it was eccentricity for eccentricity's sake. But in reality, every detail, every gesture, every headline-grabbing stunt was calculated to do one thing: make him impossible to ignore. If the world did not notice Dali, it did not exist for him. And this is the first lesson. Fame, influence, and fortune are not gifts. You must seize them with relentless focus, with obsession that consumes you entirely. From the moment he walked into the Parisian art scene in the late 1920s, Dali understood something most artists, even today, fail to grasp. Talent alone is invisible without a stage. Dali did not simply paint, he performed, and in performing, he became unforgettable. He arrived at the Dadaist exhibitions wearing a deep-sea diving suit. One could imagine the conversation. Why is he wearing a diving suit in a crowded gallery? And yet, he knew exactly why. That suit became a story, a narrative, a piece of performance art that no critic could ignore. And this wasn't just a funny anecdote, it was a declaration: obsession wins. If you are not fully committed to being seen, to being recognized, to being remembered, then the world will pass you by. It's easy to say, just be yourself. But harder to obsess over your image to the point where it becomes your identity and your weapon. Dali understood that visibility is the currency of fame. He cultivated what we now call personal branding decades before social media existed. His waxed, upturned mustache was not merely fashion, it was a symbol. He called it a living signature, something that transformed his very presence into art. Every photograph, every interview, every public appearance reinforced the narrative. Dali is larger than life. You cannot ignore him. Obsession wins. Obsession wins. Obsession wins. Repetition is key because the world does not forget repetition. The world does not forget obsession. But obsession without strategy is chaos. Dali combined audacity with meticulous planning. He understood how to manipulate public attention, how to orchestrate events so that even scandal became a tool. Take, for example, his relationship with the Surrealist movement in Paris. The Surrealists initially embraced him but quickly became wary of his self-promotional antics. Dali responded by embracing even more outrageous behavior, arriving at the Surrealist ball in a lobster telephone hat, staging bizarre public performances, making bold statements in magazines. He did not retreat from criticism, he leveraged it. This is a critical lesson for anyone seeking to leave a mark. The real question is not whether the world will like you, but whether it will notice you. Dali noticed this early, and he acted on it relentlessly. Not only did Dali master the public stage, but he also understood the intimate power of obsession in his craft. His paintings were meticulous, surreal, and saturated with detail. The persistence he applied to perfecting each work mirrored the obsession he cultivated in public life. When we look at the persistence of memory, we see not just melting clocks and dreamlike landscapes, but the results of hundreds of hours of obsessive precision. Obsession wins. Obsession wins. Dali's life is a testament to the fact that brilliance and fame are inseparable when driven by complete, unrelenting focus. It's not talent alone that creates legends. It's obsession applied with consistency and audacity. Dali's obsession extended beyond art into business, and this is what separates legends from merely talented individuals. He understood the value of licensing his image, selling prints, and monetizing every opportunity to expand his influence. He once said, "Those who do not want to imitate anything, produce nothing." But he did not merely imitate, he amplified himself, creating a persona that was marketable, memorable, and unavoidable. If we don't apply this principle, then we risk being excellent in isolation, skilled but unseen. Dali understood that fame and fortune require a fusion of genius and obsession. Without both, the world forgets you. Let's examine another example: his collaboration with Alfred Hitchcock on the dream sequence for the film Spellbound. Not only did Dali bring his artistic genius to cinema, but he also knew that this collaboration would extend his visibility beyond the gallery walls. It's easy to say, "I just want to focus on my craft," but harder to obsess over opportunities that amplify your presence. Dali's obsession was holistic. He cultivated every aspect of his career to ensure the world could not ignore him. He turned attention into currency, controversy into influence, and obsession into a brand that remains iconic nearly a century later. What we need is not mere inspiration from Dali, but instruction. How did he do it? First, he obsessed over visibility. Second, he amplified that obsession through audacious acts that created conversation. Third, he transformed that attention into tangible achievements, whether in painting, writing, or film. Obsession is not reckless indulgence. It is disciplined, deliberate, and strategic. The more important issue is not whether you feel ready to step into the spotlight, but whether you are willing to commit fully to being seen, to being remembered, to being unignorable. Obsession wins. Obsession wins. And it always will. You might think that Dali's flamboyance was mere personality, but in reality, it was a disciplined weapon. Just as his brushstrokes in The Elephants or The Burning Giraffe were deliberate, so too were his public appearances, interviews, and persona. Far from being accidental, every choice reinforced the core message: I am here. I matter. You cannot forget me. This is about more than art. It's about creating a life that leaves an indelible mark. Whether you like it or not, the world responds to visibility and obsession. Those who fail to cultivate it are invisible, and those who embrace it are immortal. Don't just take my word for it. Look at the timeline of his life. By the time he was 30, Dali was already internationally recognized. By the 1940s, he had sold paintings, collaborated with Hollywood, published books, and secured a place in global culture. Every headline, every eccentric act, every mustache waxed to perfection contributed to a single truth: obsession wins. Obsession wins. If you are not obsessed, you will be forgotten. Dali did not wait for the world to notice him. He forced it to notice him. And you can do the same in life, in your career, in your ambitions. Obsession wins. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of seeing fame, fortune, and influence as a disciplined game. Chapter 2. Calculated Genius. Picasso's Strategy for Supremacy. When we talk about genius in art, most people think of raw talent, emotion, or flamboyant personality. But with Pablo Picasso, what we see is something deeper: calculated genius. Calculated action wins. Calculated action wins. Strategy transforms talent into legacy. Unlike Dali, who grabbed headlines through spectacle, Picasso mastered influence quietly, deliberately, and relentlessly. He understood that long-term supremacy is not achieved through flamboyance alone. It is achieved through deliberate, repeated, and precise action. The real question is not whether you have talent. The real question is how you convert talent into recognition, influence, and permanence. Picasso's career demonstrates this principle at every stage. Born in Malaga, Spain in 1881, he displayed prodigious talent as a child. But what made Picasso extraordinary was not just early ability. It was his obsessive study of every art form, every style, and every trend that could position him ahead of the art world. He mastered the classical, the romantic, the symbolist, and eventually revolutionized modern art through Cubism. Not only did he innovate, but he also ensured that his innovation was timely, marketable, and influential. This is about more than artistry. It's about strategy, discipline, and foresight. By his early 20s, Picasso had moved to Paris, the center of the modern art scene. Far from being intimidated, he studied the landscape meticulously. Who were the collectors? Who were the critics? Which galleries held the power? What was the public appetite? He did not leave his success to chance. Picasso's genius was his ability to calculate risk, analyze trends, and act decisively. Not because he wanted to dominate, but because he understood that to leave a lasting legacy, he had to master the rules of the market and play them to his advantage. Take Cubism, for example. Created alongside Georges Braque, Cubism did not emerge from whimsy. It was the result of precise observation of form, perspective, and influence from African masks. But more than technique, Cubism was strategically presented. Picasso exhibited the work deliberately, causing shock, intrigue, and debate. Public controversy became a tool to cement his position. Just as Dali used spectacle, so too did Picasso use controversy. But Picasso's method was subtle, intellectual, and controlled. Calculated action wins. Calculated action wins. Strategy transforms talent into legacy. It's easy to say, "I'll innovate and the world will notice." But harder to innovate with an understanding of timing, reception, and influence. Picasso's early blue period, followed by the rose period, were not just aesthetic choices. They were carefully sequenced phases that established his identity, cultivated audiences, and prepared the ground for Cubism. Every choice reinforced the perception of mastery. Every exhibition was a calculated move to dominate the art market. The more important issue is not whether you feel ready to innovate, but whether you are willing to act strategically in ways that maximize impact. Picasso also understood the value of relentless productivity. He did not wait for inspiration. He produced continuously. By some estimates, he created over 20,000 works of art, including paintings, drawings, sculptures, and ceramics. His output was not haphazard. It was disciplined and intentional. Not only did this sustain his relevance, but it also ensured that he dominated every segment of the art world. The real lesson here: strategy requires execution. Without action, calculated planning is meaningless. Calculated action wins. Every day you delay, someone else takes the space you could occupy. The financial dimension of Picasso's strategy is equally instructive. He understood collectors, markets, and pricing. He nurtured relationships with patrons and galleries, building networks that amplified his influence. This was not vanity. It was deliberate business acumen. You might think that great art sells itself, but in reality, the world rewards visibility, networks, and strategic positioning. Picasso's dominance was not accidental. It was meticulously constructed. This is about more than producing masterpieces. It's about creating systems, influence, and channels that convert talent into fortune and long-term recognition. Not because he was calculating in personality, but because he treated life and art as a series of deliberate moves. Picasso created a career that endured decades. Far from being reckless or whimsical, his decisions, from subject matter to exhibitions, from collaboration to marketing, were consistently aligned with his vision of supremacy. If we don't recognize the importance of strategy and genius, then we risk undervaluing preparation, analysis, and timing in our own pursuits. Talent alone is fleeting. Strategy transforms talent into legacy. Consider his personal life. Picasso's relationships, marriages, and friendships were often complex. But even here, his decisions reinforced his influence. He surrounded himself with muses who inspired art and critics who challenged him, constantly testing boundaries while ensuring his dominance. This is not to romanticize manipulation. This is to illustrate that calculated genius requires awareness of context, opportunity, and environment. What we need is not passive inspiration, but deliberate orchestration of conditions that favor your success. Strategy transforms talent into legacy. Let's talk specifics. Picasso's 1937 masterpiece, Guernica. Not only was it a work of profound artistic and political significance, but its timing, presentation, and global exhibition were strategically engineered to cement his place as a moral and cultural authority. He did not merely react to events. He calculated how his response would resonate, how it would influence critics, patrons, and the public. It's easy to admire the painting, but harder to replicate the discipline and foresight that made it a turning point in both art and history. The more important issue is this: strategy does not diminish genius, it amplifies it. Dali relied on spectacle. Picasso relied on calculation. Both achieved fame, fortune, and immortality, but through very different pathways. This chapter is not about choosing one over the other. It is about understanding that deliberate, calculated action can convert raw talent into empire-level influence. Obsession and audacity are powerful, but strategy is enduring. Strategy transforms talent into legacy. To apply Picasso's lessons today, you must combine your skill with foresight. Study the environment, understand your audience, anticipate trends, and execute with discipline. Not only will this maximize your visibility, but it will ensure that your influence lasts far beyond initial attention. Don't just react to circumstances. Create conditions in which success becomes inevitable. The real question is not how talented you are, but how effectively you act on that talent. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of understanding the second path to supremacy. If Dali teaches the power of obsession and spectacle, Picasso teaches the power of planning, foresight, and execution. Both lessons are crucial for anyone who wants to dominate their field, leave a mark, and create a legacy that endures. And now, as we move to the next chapter, we will explore how both obsession and strategy converge when one is willing to risk everything for greatness. Chapter 3. Risk everything or fade away. Fame is not given. Recognition is not a gift. Legacy is not handed to the timid. Whether you like it or not, the world rewards those who are willing to risk everything. Dali and Picasso understood this instinctively. Risk everything. Risk everything. Play it safe, and you vanish. This chapter is about the one factor that separates legends from mediocrity: the willingness to embrace risk, to defy expectations, and to stake reputation, comfort, and security on the pursuit of greatness. Salvador Dali's entire career was a series of calculated risks. Far from being a passive observer of life, he pushed surrealism to extremes that shocked the world. It's easy to admire the persistence of memory and think the masterpiece was inevitable. But the truth is that Dali risked ridicule, rejection, and marginalization to create it. Surrealism itself was a radical departure from traditional art, and even within the movement, Dali's interpretations were extreme. He painted melting clocks, distorted bodies, and dreamscapes that unsettled and fascinated audiences simultaneously. The real question is not whether the public would understand, but whether Dali would allow fear to dictate his creativity. He did not risk everything. Not only did Dali embrace artistic risk, but he also embraced social and professional risk. He famously declared that "I am surrealism," positioning himself as the movement's living embodiment. Critics challenged him, peers questioned his methods, and yet Dali persisted. He turned every scandal into a spectacle, every controversy into a conversation, every dismissal into a headline. Far from being reckless, it was deliberate. He understood that comfort is the enemy of immortality. The more important issue is that you cannot achieve legendary status without stepping into the unknown, without risking the familiar, and without placing everything on the line for your vision. Picasso, in his own way, lived the same principle, but through calculated innovation. When he and Georges Braque developed Cubism, they shattered centuries of traditional representation. People were bewildered. Critics were outraged. Patrons were hesitant. The real question is not whether Cubism was understood immediately, but whether Picasso allowed fear to paralyze his creativity. He did not. He doubled down. He persisted. He risked his reputation, his relationships with galleries, and even his financial stability to redefine the world's understanding of form and perspective. Risk everything. Risk everything. Risk everything. What we need is not hesitation, but rather audacious action aligned with skill. Risk is not merely danger. Risk is the gateway to influence. Dali risked public scorn. Picasso risked traditional acceptance. Both understood that fame is rarely granted. It is seized by those willing to endure temporary discomfort for permanent recognition. This is about more than artistic courage. It's about adopting a mindset where fear becomes fuel rather than a barrier. It's not that Dali or Picasso lacked fear. In fact, both understood the consequences of failure, public ridicule, and financial instability. But they refused to let fear dictate their actions. Just as Dali transformed eccentricity into a weapon, Picasso transformed calculated innovation into dominance. Obsession and strategy are critical, but if they are not paired with courage, they remain incomplete. The lesson here is clear: risk is non-negotiable. Consider Dali's collaboration with Alfred Hitchcock on Spellbound. He did not simply design a dream sequence. He introduced imagery so radical that it could have undermined the film entirely. But Dali understood that pushing boundaries was essential for his visibility and for the influence of surrealism. It's easy to admire the final product, but harder to take the audacious step of creating something that could fail spectacularly. And yet, Dali did it, and the result cemented his reputation in both art and popular culture. The more important issue is that the act of taking calculated risks often has a greater impact than the results themselves. Risk itself signals greatness. Picasso's willingness to risk extended into his personal and professional relationships as well. He surrounded himself with critics and collaborators who challenged his conventions. He experimented with subject matter, color, and form in ways that alienated some collectors but attracted others. Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, painted in 1907, was so controversial that it shocked his contemporaries. But Picasso's courage to defy convention ultimately redefined the boundaries of art. Not only did he risk rejection, but he also risked destabilizing his own career. And yet, it was this very risk that secured his place in history. You might think that risk is reckless. You might believe that risk is optional. But in reality, risk is unavoidable if you aim for influence. If we don't risk reputation, security, and comfort, then we risk mediocrity. Risk is the bridge between talent and legacy. Just as Dali turned eccentricity into power, and Picasso turned innovation into dominance, you too must embrace the discomfort of uncertainty and the possibility of failure. Risk is the currency of immortality. Not because risk is glamorous, but because risk is decisive. Every headline Dali grabbed, every exhibition Picasso challenged, every bold experiment they undertook, was a calculated wager on their vision. Far from being impulsive, both artists analyzed potential outcomes, understood their environment, and acted decisively. That is the core of mastery, the courage to risk in alignment with insight, knowledge, and preparation. This is about more than artistry. It's about behavioral discipline. Take action even when success is uncertain. Push boundaries even when rejection is likely. Invest in yourself even when others doubt you. Don't just admire Dali or Picasso from a distance. Learn from their courage and apply it directly to your life. Whether in business, creativity, or personal growth, the formula is the same: risk, repeat, refine, and persist. Risk everything. Don't just take my word for it. Look at the careers of these two giants. Dali's fame skyrocketed in the 1930s, but not before decades of audacious performances, radical imagery, and calculated eccentricity. Picasso's dominance of modern art was not instantaneous. It required bold experimentation, defiance of norms, and constant challenge of his own boundaries. Both artists demonstrate that temporary discomfort is a necessary cost of permanent impact. The more important issue is that if you are unwilling to take risks, you will remain ordinary. Obsession and strategy are important, but without action, without the willingness to risk, you cannot achieve greatness. It's easy to admire the masterpieces, but harder to understand the audacity behind them. This chapter is your blueprint. Embrace discomfort, defy expectation, and stake everything on the pursuit of your vision. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of understanding the synergy of obsession, strategy, and risk. Dali's flamboyant courage meets Picasso's calculated bravery to show that true fame and fortune demand both audacity and intelligence. If you want to dominate your field, leave a mark, and create a legacy, you must risk everything. Remember, risk everything. Play it safe, and you vanish. Next, we will explore how controversy itself can be transformed into currency, showing that boldness and risk not only create opportunity but can be leveraged into lasting influence and recognition. Chapter 4. Turning controversy into currency. Controversy is not a byproduct of fame. It is the fuel of it. Whether you like it or not, the world pays attention to those who disrupt the expected, those who provoke debate, those who make people uncomfortable. Salvador Dali and Pablo Picasso mastered this principle in ways that still resonate today. Controversy is currency. Controversy is currency. Without it, the world ignores you. This chapter is about understanding how boldness, provocation, and the willingness to polarize can be transformed into influence, recognition, and financial success. Dali's career is a masterclass in this principle. It's easy to admire his paintings and assume his fame was inevitable. But in reality, Dali understood that talent alone was invisible without spectacle. He realized that shocking the art world was not just a gimmick, it was a strategic move. When Dali presented his infamous lobster telephone or arrived at exhibitions in outrageous costumes, he was making a statement, Notice me, engage with me, remember me. Far from being reckless, these acts were calculated. They forced discussion, generated headlines, and positioned Dali at the center of the cultural conversation. Controversy is currency. Controversy is currency. Controversy is currency. Not only did Dali leverage spectacle, but he also leveraged conflict. He frequently clashed with the surrealist movement itself, challenging its leaders, questioning its dogmas, and asserting his independence. You might think rebellion is risky or counterproductive, but in reality, it was a strategy to amplify his presence. Every public argument, every provocative statement, every challenge to authority served to reinforce his visibility. Dali understood a core truth. Attention is the first step to influence, and influence is the first step to fortune. If we don't embrace this principle, then we risk fading into obscurity, no matter how talented we are. Picasso applied the same principle, though in a different form. He understood that controversy need not be flamboyant to be effective. Instead, he provoked intellectual debate. His 1907 painting Les Demoiselles d'Avignon shocked collectors, critics, and fellow artists. The distorted forms, the aggressive fragmentation of the human figure, the rejection of classical perspective, all of it was deliberate. Critics initially rejected the work. Galleries hesitated to display it. But Picasso persisted, knowing that disrupting conventional expectations was the fastest path to recognition and market dominance. Not because he sought outrage, but because he understood that debate attracts attention, and attention transforms into power. Controversy is currency. The more important issue is that controversy must be purposeful. Random scandal without substance is noise. It is fleeting, forgotten, and ignored. Dali and Picasso demonstrate that for controversy to become currency, it must be tied to exceptional output. Dali's surrealist paintings, writing, and public spectacles were not empty gestures. They were anchored in talent, precision, and vision. Picasso's Cubist innovations were not mere shock tactics. They were carefully constructed, intellectually rigorous transformations of art itself. The lesson is clear. Controversy without quality is hollow, but controversy paired with excellence multiplies your influence. Consider Dali's statement in 1934, "Those who do not want to imitate anything, produce nothing." On the surface, it appears as a defense of originality. But in context, it is a challenge, a provocation aimed at his peers and critics. He deliberately positioned himself as both iconoclast and authority, forcing the art world to confront him. This is about more than art. It's about positioning yourself in the marketplace of attention. Whether you like it or not, the world notices boldness first and evaluates skill second. Dali internalized this principle, making his public persona inseparable from his art. Controversy is currency. Picasso's strategic use of controversy extended beyond individual works. He cultivated rivalries with fellow artists, challenged prevailing tastes, and even provoked collectors to act. His approach to the 1930s Parisian art market was calculated. By unsettling expectations, he ensured that collectors, galleries, and patrons were compelled to engage with him. Far from being reckless, this was deliberate. Picasso understood that if you make people uncomfortable, if you provoke discussion, if you create friction, you occupy space that others cannot. The more important issue is not the immediate reaction, but the lasting visibility that comes from being unforgettable. It's easy to admire controversy from a distance, but harder to wield it effectively. Dali could shock because he backed it with extreme technical mastery. Picasso could provoke debate because he backed it with genius. Both artists show that controversy alone is insufficient. Without skill, without substance, without strategy, it becomes noise. What we need is not random attention, but rather intentional, calculated disruption. This is the core of turning controversy into currency. Align disruption with excellence, risk with discipline, spectacle with talent. Controversy then becomes a tool, not a liability. Not only does controversy attract attention, but it also converts attention into opportunity. Galleries wanted to exhibit Dali's work because he drew crowds. Patrons wanted Picasso's work because debate increased demand. Controversy directly impacted their market value, not indirectly, but measurably. You might think that fame and fortune are separate from artistic innovation, but in reality, they are intertwined. By understanding the mechanisms of attention, both Dali and Picasso converted shock, debate, and disagreement into cultural dominance and financial security. Let's apply this lesson to your own life. You do not need to create melting clocks or cubist canvases to leverage controversy. The principle is universal. Identify what challenges assumptions in your industry, your community, or your audience. Then act with skill, confidence, and intention to provoke thought, discussion, and engagement. This is about more than creating waves. It's about creating influence. The real question is not whether people agree with you, but whether they are compelled to engage with you. Controversy is the accelerator of influence. Controversy is the accelerator of opportunity. Controversy is the accelerator of recognition. Dali and Picasso also show that controversy is iterative. One act of provocation is rarely enough. Repetition compounds influence. Dali's exhibitions, interviews, and public stunts were relentless. Picasso's innovations, provocations, and calculated rivalries were consistent. The cumulative effect is not just attention, it is authority. The more important issue is that influence grows exponentially when controversy is applied strategically and repeatedly. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of understanding the mechanisms that make risk, obsession, and controversy powerful tools for building fame and fortune. Dali's flamboyant spectacles, Picasso's intellectual provocations, both show us that attention, when harnessed deliberately, becomes a currency that can buy visibility, opportunity, and legacy. If you ignore this principle, you remain invisible. If you embrace it, you become unforgettable. Remember, controversy is currency. Without it, the world ignores you. Chapter 5. The Art of Self-Branding Before Social Media. Your skill can be unmatched. Your work can be extraordinary. But if no one notices, if no one associates you with excellence, then talent alone will not make you famous. Whether you like it or not, perception is reality. Dali and Picasso understood this better than almost anyone in the 20th century. Your image sells you. Your image sells you. Skill alone is invisible without a brand. This chapter is about the deliberate craft of self-branding, how both artists transformed themselves into icons whose persona became inseparable from their art. Let's start with Salvador Dali. Far from being merely eccentric, Dali meticulously curated his image. From his waxed, upturned mustache to his theatrical public appearances, he treated himself as a living artwork. He once said, "The one thing I am willing to do is to be myself, completely, entirely, and excessively myself." Notice the deliberate language. Dali's self-awareness was not casual, it was a calculated performance. Not because he wanted attention, but because he understood the power of visibility. Every gesture, every interview, every photograph reinforced a consistent narrative. Dali is unforgettable. Your image sells you. It's easy to say, "I'll let my work speak for itself," but harder to understand that the world often notices image before substance. Dali's mastery of self-branding ensured that his work could not be separated from his persona. He appeared at exhibitions in deep-sea diving suits, drove absurd vehicles to galleries, and spoke in deliberately provocative statements. Far from being random, each act was designed to create conversation and capture attention. The real question is not whether people like your image, but whether your image makes them remember you. Your image sells you. Picasso approached branding differently, but with equal sophistication. He was quieter, subtler, but no less strategic. He cultivated influence networks, patrons, collectors, critics, and fellow artists, ensuring that his name circulated in the corridors of power in the art world. He understood that recognition was not just a matter of talent, but of who associated your name with influence. The more important issue is not only creating great work, but positioning it so that it reaches the people who matter. Just as Dali turned spectacle into branding, so too did Picasso turn relationships and networks into leverage. Skill alone is invisible without a brand. Not only did Dali focus on visibility, but he also controlled narrative. He was conscious of every story, every interview, and every appearance. He created mystique around his personal life, his creative process, and even his eccentricities. Far from being accidental, this cultivated curiosity amplified the perceived value of his work. People didn't just buy Dali's paintings. They bought the narrative surrounding Dali himself. This is about more than artistry. It's about creating a persona that enhances the impact of your work. Picasso, on the other hand, integrated branding into the substance of his career. He understood that influence grows through perception as much as production. By strategically displaying his work, managing relationships with galleries, and participating selectively in public exhibitions, he controlled how he was seen in the art world. He made sure that collectors, critics, and historians associated him with innovation, mastery, and authority. You might think that branding is superficial, but in reality, it determines which names survive in history and which vanish in obscurity. Consider Dali's collaboration with Harper's Bazaar, Vogue, and even Alfred Hitchcock. He extended his brand beyond galleries and museums into popular culture. He understood that visibility across different mediums amplifies influence exponentially. Not only did this cement his reputation, but it also created financial opportunities that most artists at the time could not access. Far from being vanity, these moves were strategic. Whether you like it or not, the marketplace of attention rewards those who manage both skill and image. The lesson here applies far beyond art. If you are a creator, an entrepreneur, or a professional, your skill alone is insufficient. You must actively cultivate your image, your story, and your presence. Your audience, your clients, your peers, they all judge your work through the lens of your brand. Dali and Picasso demonstrate two extremes of the same principle: spectacle or subtlety, audacity or strategy, but both achieve the same outcome: dominance. The more important issue is not which style you choose, but whether you understand that visibility and perception are as critical as talent. It's not that branding is deceitful, it's that it is deliberate. Dali's flamboyance was authentic to his persona, but it was also curated. Picasso's influence networks were authentic to his social skill, but they were also managed strategically. In both cases, self-branding magnified impact. Just as a masterfully painted canvas is incomplete without proper framing, so too is talent incomplete without the deliberate cultivation of image. Your image sells you. Skill alone is invisible without a brand. You might think that social media makes branding easier, but in reality, Dali and Picasso achieved this without digital tools. They mastered attention with the tools of their time: exhibitions, interviews, publications, collaborations, and relationships. This shows that branding is not about technology. It is about strategy, consistency, and visibility. Whether you like it or not, people will form impressions of you. The question is, do you control those impressions, or do you leave them to chance? Consider Dali's waxed mustache, a simple detail that became iconic. It was not just a fashion statement. It was a visual signature, immediately recognizable and endlessly discussed. Picasso's careful selection of which works to exhibit and which patrons to cultivate served a similar function in his own domain. Both artists demonstrate the principle that your persona, whether flamboyant or subtle, must be consistent, deliberate, and aligned with your ultimate goals. Don't just admire the results. Apply the principle. Craft your narrative. Manage your relationships strategically. Align every public action with the story you want the world to tell about you. Far from being a distraction, this is a multiplier of your skill. The world is filled with talented people who remain unknown, invisible, and forgotten, not because they lack ability, but because they fail to manage perception. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of mastering how visibility, strategy, and persona combine to create lasting influence. Dali's spectacle and Picasso's networks show that branding is a deliberate, repeatable discipline. Talent opens the door, but image ensures you are seen, remembered, and sought after. Whether in art, business, or life, this principle is non-negotiable. Next, we will explore how relentless work, discipline, and productivity amplify branding, turning influence into dominance. Chapter 6. Outwork, outthink, outshine. Talent without effort is invisible. Genius without discipline is wasted. Whether you like it or not, the world does not reward potential, it rewards results. Salvador Dali and Pablo Picasso understood this at the core of their being. Outwork, outthink, outshine. Repeat. No shortcuts, no excuses. This chapter is about the relentless grind that transforms brilliance into legacy, about the daily, brutal, obsessive commitment that separates legends from the rest. Let's start with Dali. His creativity was famously bizarre, surreal, and unconstrained. But far from being spontaneous, It was forged through obsessive effort. Dali himself declared, "I do not paint a portrait to look like the subject, but to express my feeling about him." Feelings alone, however, do not produce masterpieces. Dali worked long hours in his studio, meticulously planning, painting, and revising, often in isolated, almost monastic conditions. You might think that surrealism is spontaneous, but in reality, it demands discipline, precision, and repetition. Outwork, outthink, outshine, repeat. It's not that Dali lacked inspiration. It's that he knew inspiration without work is worthless. He often slept with a key in hand so that the moment he dozed off, he could immediately wake and capture fleeting dreams, translating them into images on canvas. Far from eccentricity for its own sake, this was a deliberate method to harness subconscious thought and transform it into tangible output. The more important issue is that obsession without action is impotent. Dali's brilliance required both imagination and hours of deliberate labor. Outwork, outthink, outshine, repeat. Picasso approached effort differently, but with the same intensity. His work was not just creative, it was strategic. Picasso produced an astonishing volume of work, over 20,000 pieces in his lifetime. Paintings, sketches, sculptures, ceramics. He outworked everyone around him. But more than volume, he cultivated a practice of constant intellectual engagement. Every brushstroke, every composition, every stylistic experiment was calculated to challenge conventions and position himself as the preeminent authority in modern art. Not only did he work, but he worked with purpose. It's easy to admire the masterpieces from afar, but harder to imagine the day-to-day rigor behind them. Dali painted obsessively for hours, meticulously constructing dreamscapes that others would dismiss as absurd. Picasso sketched and revised relentlessly, dissecting every angle, every form, every line until it achieved perfection. This is about more than persistence. It's about a methodical, repetitive commitment to mastery. Talent opens doors, but effort walks you through them. The real question is not whether you have ideas, but whether you have the discipline to execute them. Dali's The Persistence of Memory took weeks of planning, layering, and precise execution. Every distorted clock, every barren landscape, every shadow was intentional, deliberate, and repeated until it matched his vision. Picasso's Guernica was similarly methodical. Sketches, studies, and adjustments spanned months, each phase refining not just the image but the emotional and narrative impact. Not because effort alone guarantees success, but because genius without work fades into obscurity. Far from being a glamorous pursuit, both Dali and Picasso endured gripping days, mental exhaustion, and social isolation. They understood that the visible results, the headlines, the exhibitions, the acclaim, were the product of invisible, relentless labor. What we need is not wishful thinking, but rather obsession coupled with execution. The more important issue is that consistent effort compounds over time, creating momentum that no single stroke of inspiration can match. Outthink is equally critical. Both artists were not just painting, they were planning, strategizing, and anticipating. Dali would study public reaction, critique, and even ridicule, using it to refine his next move. Picasso analyzed the art market, the collectors, and cultural trends, ensuring his next innovation landed where it would have maximum impact. Skill alone is invisible. Strategy turns effort into influence. Consider the daily routines. Dali reportedly worked from 10 a.m. until 8 p.m., sometimes longer, treating his studio as a laboratory for dreams. Picasso's schedule was similarly obsessive. Mornings spent sketching, afternoons revising, evenings networking with patrons and critics. These routines were not optional. They were non-negotiable. You might think that genius moves at the pace of inspiration, but in reality, it moves at the pace of discipline. Not only did effort manifest in quantity, but also in experimentation. Dali tested bizarre techniques, unconventional media, and surreal concepts relentlessly. Picasso explored styles, from blue to rose, from cubism to neoclassicism, constantly evolving and adapting. Both demonstrate that relentless work does not mean repetition without reflection. It means producing, analyzing, and refining continuously. If we don't engage in this iterative cycle, then we risk stagnation. No one can deny that talent matters, but what's often overlooked is the role of brutal, repetitive practice. Dali and Picasso did not rely on occasional bursts of brilliance. They relied on daily labor, obsessive refinement, and deliberate application of their intelligence. This is about more than art. It's about the universal principle of mastery. Repetition compounds skill. Discipline magnifies talent. Obsession delivers results. You might think that hard work alone is enough, but in reality, effort must be paired with strategic thinking and bold execution. Picasso's calculated risks, Dali's public spectacles, their careful self-branding, all were amplified because of the foundation of relentless work. Execution transforms vision into legacy. The lesson is clear. If you want to dominate your field, leave a mark, and secure lasting influence, you must commit to obsessive, deliberate work combined with strategic thinking and bold execution. Talent opens the door, but effort forces it wide. Discipline multiplies impact. Strategy ensures recognition. And audacity converts all of it into influence. Outwork, outthink, outshine. No shortcuts, no excuses. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of understanding the final stages of mastery. How Dali and Picasso converted relentless effort into enduring fame, fortune, and legacy. And in the next chapter, we will explore how the relentless grind intersects with influence, visibility, and the creation of an immortal personal brand. Chapter 7. Chaos versus Control. Different paths to the same goal. Success is not one size fits all. Whether you like it or not, there are multiple paths to influence, recognition, and mastery. What matters is intensity, consistency, and the courage to embrace your method fully. Salvador Dali thrived in chaos. Pablo Picasso thrived in control. Chaos or control, choose your weapon. But commit fully. Commit fully. This chapter explores the contrasting approaches of these two legends and reveals a universal principle. There is no single formula for success, but there is a formula for consistency, discipline, and intensity. Dali's chaos was deliberate. Far from being random eccentricity, his flamboyant persona, unpredictable public behavior, and surrealist spectacles were strategic tools. When Dali arrived at an art exhibition in a deep-sea diving suit in 1936, he shocked the audience, but he also cemented his visibility. Not because he wanted mere attention, but because he understood that chaos creates conversation. The more important issue is that unpredictability, when aligned with skill, magnifies influence. Dali's method shows that embracing chaos can be a weapon, if wielded consistently and intentionally. Chaos or control, choose your weapon, but commit fully. Chaos breeds fascination. Dali's public interviews, outrageous claims, and surreal performances forced the world to engage with him and his art. Critics were provoked. Collectors were intrigued. The public was captivated. He leveraged the unexpected as a mechanism for influence. You might think that chaos is risky or uncontrollable, but in reality, Dali controlled his chaos precisely to produce outcomes: attention, notoriety, and opportunity. Far from being accidental, his approach was a disciplined performance in unpredictability. Picasso, on the other hand, operated in near-perfect control. His days were meticulously structured, his experiments systematically executed. He approached every series of works, Blue Period, Rose Period, Cubism, Surrealism, with deliberate planning. His workshop was methodical. Every sketch, every study, every adjustment was purposeful. Not only did he outthink his contemporaries, but he also outworked them. He calculated trends, anticipated collector preferences, and positioned his innovations strategically. Control was his weapon. It's easy to say that success requires talent or luck, but harder to appreciate the nuance of method. Dali thrived when he embraced the unpredictable. Picasso thrived when he imposed order on the world. Both achieved massive influence, recognition, and financial reward. This isn't a contradiction. It is evidence that personal alignment is more important than copying someone else. Far from being interchangeable, chaos and control are tools that amplify your natural strengths. The more important issue is that whichever path you choose, consistency is non-negotiable. Dali's eccentricities were amplified because of his obsessive work ethic. His chaos was never unproductive. It was always anchored in skill. He once said, "The secret of my influence is the same as the secret of my work. Work, 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 and never stop." Notice the interplay. chaos in presentation, control in production. You might think unpredictability cannot coexist with discipline, but in reality, it can, and it must, if chaos is to produce results. Picasso's controlled approach also relied on intensity. His production was prolific, thousands of works over decades. He studied each line, shape, and form with precision. He anticipated market reactions and cultural shifts decades in advance. His control did not limit creativity. It amplified it, creating influence that endured long past his lifetime. Just as Dali harnessed chaos to achieve visibility, so too did Picasso harness control to secure authority and dominance. Not because one path is better than the other, but because mastery requires alignment with your strengths. Some thrive in unpredictability, generating energy from disruption. Others thrive in structure, generating energy from precision. The real question is not which path is right. It is whether you are leveraging your natural tendencies with maximum intensity. Far from being rigid, success is flexible, but only if intensity and consistency are present. Consider their outcomes. Dali became a global icon, instantly recognizable, endlessly discussed, and eternally influential. Picasso became a market leader, a historical authority, and an enduring symbol of intellectual mastery. Different methods, same results. No one can deny that their influence was extraordinary, but what's often overlooked is the alignment between method and temperament. Dali's flamboyance was productive because it suited him. Picasso's precision was productive because it suited him. This is about more than strategy. It's about self-knowledge and execution. You might think that you must imitate someone else's style to succeed, but in reality, copying is the fastest path to mediocrity. Dali's chaos would have failed if he were not uniquely Dali. Picasso's control would have failed if he were not uniquely Picasso. The principle is universal. Identify your natural operating mode and double down relentlessly. It's not that chaos is inherently better, nor that control is inherently superior. It's that both are powerful when executed with intensity, discipline, and focus. The more important issue is that success is amplified when your approach is authentic. Dali's chaos felt alive because it was authentic. Picasso's control felt authoritative because it was authentic. Whether you like it or not, authenticity multiplied by intensity creates influence. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of understanding how personal alignment with your method, whether chaotic or controlled, can drive mastery, influence, and legacy. Dali and Picasso show us that there is no single formula for greatness, only the relentless application of one's strengths with focus, discipline, and repetition. Next, we will examine how both artists monetized their influence, turning attention, reputation, and risk-taking into enduring wealth and market dominance. Chapter 8. The Price of Ambition, Love, Life, and Sacrifice. Every legend carries a price tag. Every extraordinary life comes with hidden costs. Whether you like it or not, ambition demands sacrifice. Salvador Dali and Pablo Picasso are prime examples. Men who achieved extraordinary fame and influence, but whose personal lives, comfort, and conventional happiness were often secondary to their art and recognition. Sacrifice is inevitable. Sacrifice is inevitable. Without it, greatness is impossible. This chapter explores the cost of relentless ambition, the sacrifices behind the headlines, and how these choices forge their lasting legacies. Let's begin with Dali. His life was a whirlwind of surrealist exhibitions, extravagant publicity stunts, and obsessive studio work. Sleep was a tool, not a necessity. Comfort was a distraction, not a priority. He famously described his creative process as a continuous pursuit of the irrational, where personal needs were subordinate to artistic output. Not because he sought suffering, but because he recognized that mediocrity requires minimal sacrifice, while greatness demands everything. Sacrifice is inevitable. Relationships were a particular casualty of ambition. Dali's intense focus on his persona and work placed immense strain on those around him. His wife, Gala, became both muse and manager, navigating his eccentricities, obsession, and public antics. Without her, much of Dali's career might have collapsed under the weight of his own intensity. Far from being an anomaly, this demonstrates a universal principle. When you pursue extraordinary ambition, you must be prepared for the ripple effects it creates. The more important issue is that support structures matter, but personal comfort may not survive the process. Sacrifice is inevitable. Picasso faced similar costs, though differently. His relentless drive to innovate, produce, and dominate the art world meant long hours, isolation, and intense focus. Romantic relationships were often turbulent. Friendships were tested by obsession, rivalry, and the uncompromising pursuit of influence. He lived on his own terms, in his own rhythm, but those terms required choices that left little room for conventional life. Not because he sought conflict, but because ambition leaves no space for mediocrity or distraction. It's easy to admire the fame and the masterpieces, but harder to recognize the personal cost. Sleep, comfort, conventional relationships, all were secondary. Dali's immersion in his surrealist experiments meant that daily life was frequently disrupted, routine ignored, and comfort sacrificed. Picasso's endless experimentation and market strategizing meant that personal convenience, leisure, and domestic tranquility were rare luxuries. You might think that genius enjoys life like others do, but in reality, their lives were subordinated to their work. Both men illustrate that fame and fortune are rarely granted. They are seized at a cost. Dali and Picasso knew that pursuing legacy required trade-offs. The real question is not whether you can avoid sacrifice, but whether you are willing to pay the price for greatness. Far from being cruel, this understanding is empowering. The ability to recognize the cost allows you to make deliberate choices. Not only did their ambition demand time and energy, but it also required emotional resilience. Both men faced criticism, public scrutiny, and personal betrayals. Dali's eccentricities invited mockery. Picasso's innovations provoked hostility. Enduring this relentless attention required an internal discipline that few possess. Just as they sacrificed comfort, so too did they develop resilience as a shield against external pressures. Consider their work habits. Dali often worked late into the night, capturing fleeting moments of inspiration, sleeping in short bursts, and returning immediately to his studio. Picasso maintained a regimented schedule that maximized productivity but minimized personal indulgence. Both recognized a brutal truth: time is finite, and mastery requires prioritizing work over personal comfort. It's easy to say that passion alone drives success, but harder to consistently act in alignment with it when sacrifices pile up. Relationships, in particular, demanded compromise. Dali's bond with Gala was unconventional, intense, and sacrificial, both for him and for her. Picasso's romantic entanglements were famously tumultuous, often serving as fuel for inspiration but also exacting emotional tolls. Not because they sought chaos, but because extraordinary ambition leaves no space for ordinary life. The more important issue is that when you pursue excellence, not everyone will travel with you. Some will support, some will resent, and some will be left behind. This principle extends beyond art. Entrepreneurs, innovators, and high achievers across all fields encounter the same reality. Sleep, comfort, and conventional expectations are optional. Results, impact, and legacy are non-negotiable. What we need is not avoidance of cost, but rather acceptance of it. Far from being a deterrent, understanding the price allows you to make deliberate, high-leverage decisions. You might think that sacrifice is cruel or unnecessary, but in reality, it is a prerequisite for distinction. Dali and Picasso demonstrate that the very acts which make life extraordinary, creating iconic work, achieving fame, leaving a lasting legacy, require intentional trade-offs. Whether it's isolation, personal discomfort, or strained relationships, these sacrifices are the currency of greatness. Not because you must embrace suffering for its own sake, but because ambition is not a gentle pursuit. Success, recognition, and influence demand focus, intensity, and prioritization. Outwork, outthink, outshine, sacrifice. Without trade-offs, brilliance is diluted, opportunities are missed, and legacy fades. The more important issue is that understanding the cost allows you to navigate it consciously, not blindly. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of understanding how commitment to vision, relentless effort, and willingness to pay the price converge to create iconic influence. Dali's chaos, Picasso's control, and both men's sacrifices illuminate a single truth. No greatness is achieved without giving something up. If you want to leave your mark, influence others, and be remembered, you must recognize the cost and be willing to pay it. Next, we will explore how they transformed these sacrifices into enduring legacies, where vision, risk, and relentless execution converged to cement fame and fortune. Chapter 9. Legacy is everything, beyond fame and fortune. Money fades. Fame fades. Influence can be fleeting. Whether you like it or not, what endures is your legacy. Salvador Dali and Pablo Picasso understood this better than almost anyone. They were not merely chasing wealth or recognition. They were chasing immortality. Legacy is everything. Legacy is everything. Money fades, but your mark remains forever. This chapter explores how their deliberate choices, relentless work, and calculated risks built a footprint that continues to shape the art world nearly a century later. Dali's legacy was carefully constructed through visibility, originality, and audacity. From his iconic mustache to his surrealist spectacles, every public act, every eccentric interview, every staged stunt was designed to amplify his persona and imprint it onto history. He said, "The secret of my influence is that I never hesitate to push boundaries, to be remembered." Notice the principle. Legacy is not accidental, it is deliberate. Picasso approached legacy differently, but with equal intensity. He sought to dominate the intellectual and commercial spheres of modern art. Every style he invented, from blue and rose periods to cubism, was a statement of authority. Every exhibition he curated, every collector he engaged, every critical debate he influenced was another layer in his enduring imprint. Not because he craved temporary attention, but because he understood the principle of enduring influence, consistent, strategic, and high-impact action. Legacy is everything. It's easy to admire their work, but harder to recognize the intentionality behind it. Dali did not merely create paintings. He created spectacles, narratives, and mythologies around his life and art. Picasso did not merely innovate. He engineered influence through careful positioning, intellectual dominance, and unrelenting production. The more important issue is this: legacy is built at the intersection of creativity, discipline, and strategic thinking. Consider the decisions they made about visibility. Dali embraced chaos and controversy because it ensured that people remembered him. Every headline, every shock, every surreal stunt added to a cumulative effect. The world could not ignore Salvador Dali. Far from being accidental, this was mastery of perception. You might think that shocking behavior is reckless, but in reality, when paired with skill and consistency, it is an investment in enduring influence. Picasso's approach was more controlled, but no less deliberate. He meticulously documented his work, curated his public image, and positioned his innovations at the forefront of artistic movements. His authority was not just in the studio, it was in the network of galleries, critics, collectors, and institutions he influenced. The real question is not whether fame is immediate, but whether your actions today build permanence for tomorrow. It's not about wealth, it's about permanence. Dali's paintings sell for millions today. Picasso's works are priceless. But their true value lies not in market price. It lies in enduring influence. Museums, textbooks, exhibitions, and cultural references all preserve their legacy. Not because fortune was their goal, but because deliberate action amplified their art into timeless symbols. Both men understood that legacy is cumulative. Every brushstroke, every public appearance, every carefully calculated eccentricity or strategic move contributed to the whole. Picasso once said, "It takes a lifetime to understand the effect of your work on the world." Dali echoed the sentiment. To be remembered, you must live in every moment as if the world is watching, and it is. This principle transcends art. Entrepreneurs, leaders, innovators, anyone seeking influence, must internalize it. Your reputation, your decisions, and your output compound over time. What you do today contributes to how you are remembered tomorrow. Far from being theoretical, legacy is a practical blueprint. Work obsessively, think strategically, and act audaciously. You might think that only extraordinary talent creates lasting influence. But in reality, disciplined effort, intentional positioning, and relentless execution matter just as much. Dali could have been another surrealist name lost to history without his persona and visibility strategy. Picasso could have been another modernist talent without his control, planning, and dominance over exhibitions and collectors. The more important issue is that legacy is created as much by decisions and behavior as by genius. Outwork, outthink, outshine, repeat. It's not that fame or money is irrelevant. It's that they are secondary to permanence. Both artists exemplify the principle that recognition is fleeting, but influence, carefully cultivated and executed, lasts indefinitely. Dali's surrealism continues to inspire designers, filmmakers, and artists. Picasso's cubism reshaped the trajectory of modern art and design. Whether you like it or not, permanence is the ultimate metric of achievement. Sacrifice feeds legacy. The personal costs, the obsession, the relentless grind, all culminate in something larger than life. Dali's eccentricity, Picasso's precision, both paid the price for a footprint that transcends their lifetimes. Not because they sought pain, but because they recognized that anything worthwhile requires dedication, strategy, and audacity. The lesson is unavoidable. If you want your work, influence, and impact to endure, you must think beyond the immediate. Every decision must be weighed not just for today, but for how it will contribute to your permanent mark. Every public act, every deliberate innovation, every calculated risk adds to a legacy that survives beyond fortune, fame, and even mortality. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of your understanding that influence, recognition, and lasting impact are deliberate, cumulative, and relentless. Dali and Picasso show us that if you commit to visibility, strategy, risk, and obsessive effort, your work can live long after you are gone. Next, we will examine the final chapter, how to integrate all these lessons, chaos, control, sacrifice, discipline, into a blueprint for creating your own lasting influence. Chapter 10. Copy the winners. Applying Dali and Picasso's lessons today. Here is the truth. Mastery leaves footprints. You do not need to reinvent the wheel to achieve greatness. You need to study those who have already walked the path and adopt their patterns. Salvador Dali and Pablo Picasso left clear blueprints: obsession, calculated risk, relentless output, and strategic self-promotion. Copy the winners. Copy the winners. Adapt, act, and dominate your world. This chapter will break down their methods and show you how to apply them in your own life. Let's begin with obsession. Dali's life was a testament to relentless focus. Every day, every hour, every public act revolved around building his persona, perfecting his craft, and pushing boundaries. Obsession is not optional. It is the engine that separates fleeting talent from lasting influence. Obsession wins. Obsession wins. Whether in art, business, or personal mastery, you must commit fully, daily, and consistently. No shortcuts. No excuses. If we don't cultivate obsession, then we risk being ordinary, invisible, and forgotten. Picasso approached obsession with a different flavor, but the principle is identical. His work output was staggering: thousands of paintings, drawings, sculptures, and prints. Not only was his quantity extraordinary, but the quality remained exceptional. He immersed himself in study, experimentation, and continuous refinement. Just as Dali used spectacle to amplify visibility, Picasso used mastery and production to dominate the market. Obsession is not a luxury, it is a requirement. Copy the winners. Next is calculated risk. Dali shocked audiences, knowing attention would follow. Picasso disrupted art movements, challenging critics and collectors to keep pace. Both understood that risk is not reckless, it is deliberate. The real question is not whether you can avoid risk, but whether you can manage it strategically. Far from being gambling, calculated risk magnifies opportunity. You might think that safe decisions protect you, but in reality, they limit your potential, shrink your influence, and ensure mediocrity. Relentless output is the third pillar. Dali worked day and night to produce art, spectacle, and publicity. Picasso's prolificacy became legendary. The lesson is simple. Execution matters more than mere inspiration. Ideas are worthless without action. What we need is not intermittent bursts of effort, but rather continuous, disciplined output. The more important issue is that success compounds when effort is relentless. Strategic self-promotion completes the framework. Dali turned chaos into currency, ensuring his name was remembered alongside his work. Picasso turned control into authority, embedding his influence in exhibitions, collections, and critical discourse. You must understand that talent alone is invisible. It is not enough to be brilliant behind closed doors. You must also position yourself to be seen, respected, and remembered. This is about more than marketing. It's about aligning perception with excellence. Visibility converts talent into recognition, recognition into influence, and influence into lasting impact. Now, how do you implement these lessons? First, identify your obsession. What drives you more than anything else? Where can you invest time, energy, and focus daily without distraction? Make it non-negotiable. Schedule it, guard it, and pursue it with ferocity. Obsession is the engine. Without it, calculated risk, output, and visibility cannot survive. Second, embrace calculated risk. List the opportunities that scare you most. Analyze the potential reward versus the possible cost. Decide deliberately. Dali embraced public ridicule because it amplified his visibility. Picasso experimented with disruptive forms because it consolidated his influence. Whether in business, art, or personal development, measured risk is the accelerator of impact. Third, commit to relentless output. Decide what tangible work you must produce daily, weekly, and monthly. Obsession without execution is fantasy. Dali's spectacle without paintings would have been forgotten. Picasso's innovation without production would have remained theory. Your work is the vehicle for your legacy. Fourth, manage your self-promotion strategically. Visibility is not vanity. It is leverage. Dali understood that spectacle converted attention into recognition. Picasso understood that curation, exhibitions, and collector networks converted skill into authority. Ask yourself, how is your work perceived by the world? What narratives amplify your influence? Align your actions and communication with your ambition. Your reputation is the multiplier of your effort. Finally, integrate all 4 pillars consistently. Obsession fuels output. Calculated risk expands opportunity. Relentless production demonstrates value. Strategic visibility converts your work into influence. This is the formula that created lasting fame for Dali and Picasso. This is the blueprint you can replicate today. It's not about imitation, it's about adaptation. You are not Dali. You are not Picasso. But you can internalize the principles that propelled them to immortality. Chaos or control. Obsession or discipline. Risk or caution. Visibility or invisibility. Choose deliberately, align with your strengths, and execute relentlessly. Far from being optional, this is the path to influence, recognition, and legacy. You might think that greatness is reserved for prodigies or geniuses, but in reality, the process can be learned. Study patterns, adopt strategies, and apply them with consistency. Sacrifice what is non-essential. Prioritize effort over comfort. Turn creativity into output, output into recognition, and recognition into enduring impact. This is your chance to apply lessons that shaped centuries of influence. Whether you like it or not, action defines destiny. Talent alone is inert. Ideas without implementation vanish. Obsession, risk, output, and strategic promotion. These are the engines that convert potential into influence, influence into fame, and fame into lasting legacy. The more important issue is that you can start today, in your own context, using your own resources. Adapt, act, and dominate your world. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of your transformation. Take the principles of Dali and Picasso and make them your own. Align obsession with execution, marry risk with strategy, and let visibility amplify your mastery. Your world is waiting. You've seen it. Obsession wins. Calculated action wins. Risk everything or fade away. Controversy becomes currency. Outwork, outthink, outshine. Chaos or control. Choose your weapon, but commit fully. Sacrifice is inevitable. Legacy is everything. Now it's your turn. Your talent, your creativity, your ambition. They will only matter if you act relentlessly. Today, take what Dali and Picasso taught you. Craft your image, take bold risks, dominate your craft, and never, ever settle for mediocrity. The world won't hand you fame. It won't hand you fortune. You must seize it. So start now, obsess, strategize, and leave your mark. The clock is ticking, and greatness waits for no one.